I retired and thought my family would support me, but they sent me to live in the shed until I found a case my grandfather had buried back in 1952. When I opened it, I couldn't believe my eyes. I'm glad you're here with me. Please listen to my story till the end and let me know which city you're listening from. That way I can see how far my story has traveled. I spent 32 years working as a mechanical engineer at the same manufacturing plant in Ohio. 32 years of early mornings, late nights, and barely seeing my kids grow up. But I told myself it was worth it. I was building something, a stable life, a comfortable home, a future for my family. My wife Karen and I had been married for 28 years. We had 2 children, Derek, our 30-year-old son who worked in sales, and Michelle, 26, who'd just gotten her real estate license. The house was paid off. My 401k was solid. I'd done everything right. When I turned 52 and the company offered an early retirement package, I took it. Why not? I'd earned it. I pictured fishing trips, fixing up the garage, maybe taking Karen on that trip to Colorado she'd always wanted. I imagined Sunday dinners with the kids, helping Derek with his house projects, being there for Michelle as she built her career. The retirement party was small but nice. My co-workers signed a card. My supervisor gave a speech about my dedication. Karen smiled beside me, her hand on my arm. Everything felt right. But something shifted the moment I came home for good. The first week was fine. I reorganized the garage, fixed the leaking faucet in the guest bathroom, cooked dinner twice. Karen seemed distracted. She spent more time on her phone than usual. When I suggested we start planning that Colorado trip, she said, "Maybe later. I'm busy with my book club." Derek came by that Saturday. I thought he wanted to catch up, maybe shoot some hoops like we used to. Instead, he barely stayed 20 minutes. He mentioned something about needing money for a business investment, then left when I said I needed to be careful with my retirement funds. Michelle didn't visit at all. When I called her, she sounded annoyed. "Dad, I'm working. Can this wait?" I told myself I was being paranoid. They had their own lives. This was normal. But the second week, Karen started making comments. Little things at first. "You're home all day now. Could you do the laundry? Since you're not working, maybe you could handle the grocery shopping." The requests came faster. Soon I was doing all the cooking, all the cleaning, all the yard work. When I tried to talk to her about it, she snapped. "You're retired, Robert. What else are you doing all day?" What else was I doing? I'd just spent 3 decades providing for this family. Didn't that count for something? The third week, I overheard a phone conversation. Karen was in the kitchen, speaking quietly. I was in the hallway, coming back from the bathroom. "He's here all the time now," she said. "Just underfoot. I didn't sign up for this." She laughed at something the other person said. "I know, right? Like having a third child." My stomach dropped. Was that how she saw me now? A burden? That evening, Derek and Michelle came over for dinner. I thought maybe this was a good sign. Family time. But the conversation felt strange. They kept exchanging glances. Karen was tense. Finally, Derek cleared his throat. "Dad, we need to talk about something." I set down my fork. "Okay." "The thing is," Michelle jumped in, "you're retired now. You're not contributing financially anymore." "I have my pension," I interrupted. "And savings. I'm not broke. But you're not bringing in what you used to," Derek said. "And honestly, Dad, you're taking up space. Mom needs her own life. We all do." I looked at Karen. "What is this?" She wouldn't meet my eyes. "Robert, maybe they have a point. You're always here now. It's suffocating." "Suffocating?" I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. "What are you saying?" Derek leaned forward. "The shed out back. It's weatherproof, has electricity. You could stay there for a while, give everyone some breathing room." I laughed, but it came out hollow. "You're joking." No one was laughing. "It's temporary," Karen said quickly. Just until we figure things out. Figure what out? I'd worked my entire adult life for this family. I'd provided everything. And now that I wasn't bringing in a paycheck, they wanted me out? But I saw it in their faces. They were serious. Deadly serious. I stood up slowly. My hands were shaking. You're throwing me out? Into the shed? It's not throwing you out, Michelle said, her voice cold. It's a reasonable arrangement. You're still on the property. Still on the property. The property I'd paid for, the house I'd maintained for nearly 3 decades. I looked at each of them. My wife, my children, strangers. Fine, I said quietly. Fine. I gathered some clothes, a pillow, a blanket. No one helped me. No one stopped me. I walked across the backyard in the dark, opened the shed door, and stepped inside. It smelled like motor oil and old wood. There was a cot in the corner, dusty but functional, a space heater that barely worked. One dim light bulb hanging from the ceiling. This was my life now. After everything I'd given, everything I'd sacrificed, this is what I was worth to them. I sat on the cot, staring at the concrete floor, and wondered how everything had gone so wrong so fast. That's when I noticed something odd. In the corner, near some old paint cans, the floor looked different. Some of the concrete was a slightly different color, as if it had been patched. I walked over and knelt down. There were faint tool marks around the edges. Someone had dug here. Recently? No, the patch was old, weathered. My grandfather had built this shed back in 1952. He'd been a carpenter, meticulous about his work. Why would there be a patch here? I found an old crowbar hanging on the wall. For the next hour I worked at the concrete, chipping away at the edges. My hands blistered. Sweat dripped down my face. But I kept going because I had nothing else to do, nothing else to focus on except the rage building in my chest. Finally, the concrete chunk came loose. Underneath was dirt. I dug with my hands, pulling away soil, going deeper. My fingers hit something solid. Metal. I dug faster. A handle appeared. Then the outline of a case, military style, heavy, locked with a combination lock that had rusted but still held. I dragged it out of the hole and stared at it. My grandfather's initials were scratched into the top, J.R.H. Joseph Robert Harrison. What had he buried here? And why? The lock was old but sturdy. I spent 20 minutes trying different combinations, birth years, anniversary dates, anything I could remember about my grandfather. Nothing worked. Finally, I took the crowbar and smashed the lock. It broke on the third hit, metal shards scattering across the shed floor. I opened the case. For a moment I couldn't process what I was seeing. Stacks of bills, dozens of them, wrapped in plastic, preserved. And not just any bills. These were old, some from the 1940s and 50s. There were also papers underneath, documents in protective sleeves. I pulled out one stack with shaking hands. The bills were real. I could tell from the weight, the texture. My grandfather had hidden actual cash here. How much? I started counting. 10,000 in the first stack, 20 in the second, 30, 40. My God. There was over $200,000 in this case. Maybe more. And the documents? I pulled them out carefully. Deeds to properties I didn't know existed. Stock certificates from companies that might still be valuable. A handwritten letter addressed to whoever finds this. I unfolded the letter. My grandfather's careful handwriting covered the page. If you're reading this, I'm long gone. I buried this in 1952 during the war tensions when I didn't trust banks anymore. This is everything I saved, everything I couldn't spend before I died. I hope whoever finds it, hopefully my son or his children, uses it wisely. Don't let anyone take advantage of you. Family isn't always blood. Family is who stands by you. I read that last line again. Family is who stands by you. I looked up at the house through the shed's small window. The lights were on. I could see shadows moving inside. My wife, my children, the people who'd just thrown me out like garbage. They had no idea what I'd found. They thought I was finished, used up, worthless now that I wasn't bringing home a paycheck. They'd isolated me, humiliated me, cast me aside. But I wasn't finished. Not even close. I carefully repacked the case and hid it under the cot, covering it with old blankets. My mind was racing. What should I do? Take the money and leave? Confront them? Use it as leverage? No. None of those options felt right. This wasn't just about the money. This was about respect, about being treated like a human being by the people who were supposed to love me. I needed a plan. A real one. I spent the rest of that night thinking. By dawn, I had the outline of something that might work. First, I needed information. I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. Why had my family turned on me so suddenly? Was this planned? Had they been waiting for me to retire so they could push me out? I thought back over the past few months. The signs had been there, hadn't they? Karen's increased spending, the new car she'd bought for herself. Derek constantly asking for money, always some new scheme or investment. Michelle's coldness whenever I offered advice. They'd been preparing for this. Maybe not consciously, but they'd been distancing themselves, seeing me as an ATM rather than a person. And now that the ATM wasn't producing as much, they didn't need me around. Fine. If that's how they wanted to play this, I could play too. Second, I needed to protect what I'd found. The money was mine now. My grandfather had meant it for his descendants, and I was his grandson. But I couldn't let Karen or the kids know about it. Not yet. If they found out, they'd try to take it. Claim it was marital property, that they deserved a share. I would need to move it somewhere safe, a safety deposit box maybe, or several different locations to spread the risk. Third, and this was the most important part, I needed to change the legal situation. I was still married to Karen. We had joint accounts, joint property. If I tried to leave, she could claim half of everything, including my pension. The kids could come after me too, depending on how vicious they wanted to get. But what if I didn't leave? What if I stayed right here, in this shed, and watched them? What if I gathered evidence of how they were treating me? What if I documented everything? The emotional abuse, the isolation, the way they'd forced me out of my own home? I could build a case, not just for divorce, but for a divorce that would protect my assets. I could show a pattern of behavior, show that they'd been planning this, that they'd manipulated me. It would take time, patience. But I had both now, didn't I? Fourth, I needed allies. I couldn't do this alone. I needed someone on my side, someone who understood what was happening and could help me navigate the legal complexities. I thought of my old friend Thomas from work. He'd retired 2 years ago, but we'd stayed in touch. He'd gone through a messy divorce himself. He'd know lawyers, know the process. And there was my sister, Janet, who lived 2 states over. We hadn't talked much in recent years, but we'd been close once. She'd never liked Karen, had always said there was something calculating about her. Maybe Janet had seen this coming long before I did. I pulled out my phone. It was 6 a.m, but I didn't care. I texted Thomas, "Need to talk. Urgent. Can you meet today?" His reply came 10 minutes later. "Coffee shop on Maple, noon. You okay?" I typed back. "Not really, but I will be." Next, I called Janet. She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice sleepy. "Robert, it's 6 a.m. What's wrong?" "Everything," I said. "John, I need your help. Can I tell you something crazy?" "Of course. What happened?" I told her. All of it. The retirement, the cold shoulders, the shed. I didn't mention the money yet. That was too big to share over the phone. But I told her about the betrayal, the casual cruelty, the way my own family had discarded me. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I knew it. I knew Karen was like this. Robert, I'm so sorry." "Don't be sorry," I said. "Help me fix it." "What do you need?" "Legal advice. Maybe a place to store some documents and someone to talk to who won't think I'm crazy. You're not crazy, Janet said firmly. You're seeing clearly for the first time. When can you come visit? Maybe in a few days. I need to set some things in motion here first. Okay, but Robert, be careful. If they've already pushed you this far, they might go further. I know, I said. That's what I'm counting on. After I hung up, I sat back on the cot and looked at the hidden case. My grandfather's legacy, his warning about family, about trust. He'd been right, and now I had the means to fight back. I just needed to be smart about it. Patient, calculated. They thought they'd broken me. They thought I was defeated. They had no idea what was coming. I met Thomas at the coffee shop exactly at noon. He looked older than I remembered. 2 years of retirement had added grey to his hair and lines around his eyes. But his handshake was still firm, his gaze still sharp. "You look like hell," he said, sitting down across from me. "Feel like it, too." He listened without interrupting, as I told him everything. The shed, the isolation, the way my family had systematically pushed me out. His expression grew darker with every detail. "Jesus, Rob," he finally said. "I thought my divorce was bad, but this is calculated. They planned this. I know. What are you going to do?" I leaned forward, lowering my voice. "I'm going to fight back, but I need help. I need a lawyer who understands financial abuse, emotional manipulation, someone who won't just split everything 50-50 and call it fair." Thomas nodded slowly. "I know someone. Margaret Chen. She handled my case. She's expensive, but she's ruthless when she needs to be. She'll see exactly what's happening here." He pulled out his phone and made a call right there. 5 minutes later, I had an appointment for the next morning. "What else?" Thomas asked. "What's your endgame here?" "Documentation," I said. "I need to show a pattern. Show that this wasn't just a sudden decision, that they've been planning to push me out. I need evidence." "Evidence of what, specifically?" "Financial manipulation, emotional abuse, anything that shows their true character." Thomas thought for a moment. "You're still living on the property, right? In the shed?" "Yeah." "Good, don't leave. If you move out voluntarily, it weakens your position. Stay put. Document everything they say and do. Dates, times, witnesses, if possible. Keep a journal." I nodded. This aligned with my own thinking. "And Rob?" Thomas's expression was serious. "Be prepared for this to get ugly. When people think their money is threatened, they show their worst selves. Your family will fight dirty." "Let them," I said. "I'm done being the nice guy." The next morning, I drove to Margaret Chen's office in downtown Cleveland. Her receptionist looked surprised when I walked in. I probably looked like a vagrant after days in the shed, but she showed me to a conference room anyway. Margaret was in her 50s, impeccably dressed, with eyes that missed nothing. She listened to my story with the same intensity Thomas had, taking notes on a legal pad. When I finished, she set down her pen. "Mr. Harrison, I need to be direct with you. This is elder abuse, financial and emotional. Ohio law is very clear on this subject." "I'm 52, I said. "Not exactly elderly." "The law applies to vulnerable adults of any age. You've been coerced out of your home, isolated from family support, and are being financially manipulated. The fact that they're your wife and children doesn't matter. In fact, it makes it worse." She leaned back in her chair. "Here's what we're going to do. First, you're going to keep detailed records of every interaction. I want dates, times, what was said, who was present, everything." "Already started." "Good. Second, we're going to secure your assets. You mentioned a pension and savings. I want those protected immediately. We'll set up accounts they can't access." "What about joint accounts?" "We'll freeze them if necessary. But that's a nuclear option. It'll alert them that something's changed. Better to slowly move assets to protected locations." "Can I do that legally?" "Yes, if you document the abuse. The court will see it as self-protection, not asset hiding. She paused. Is there anything else I should know? Any other assets or complications? I hesitated. The money in the case. Should I tell her? Not yet, I decided. That was my trump card. I'd reveal it when the time was right. Nothing major, I said. All right, I'll draw up paperwork this week. In the meantime, do nothing to antagonize them. Be compliant, quiet. Let them think they're winning. I left her office feeling something I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. I had a plan. I had allies. I had leverage they didn't know about. That evening I returned to the shed around dinner time. I'd started a new habit, walking around the property's perimeter just to stay visible, to remind them I was still there. They hated it. I could see Karen watching from the kitchen window, her face tight with irritation. As I passed near the house, I heard voices. The window was cracked open. They must have been airing out the kitchen. I stopped, pretending to examine a tree branch. Don't know how much longer we have to keep up this charade. Derek was saying. It's been almost 2 weeks. Be patient. Karen replied. The lawyer said we need to establish that he left voluntarily. If we push too hard, it looks bad. My blood ran cold. They had a lawyer. They were already planning legal action? What about his pension? That was Michelle's voice. Can we access it? Not while we're married. Karen said. But once the divorce is final, I'll get my share. And if we can prove abandonment... He didn't abandon us. Derek interrupted. We kicked him out. No one kicked anyone out. Karen said sharply. We offered him alternative accommodation, which he accepted. That's the story. Remember that. Alternative accommodation. My God, they'd rehearsed this. They had a narrative prepared, a legal strategy. How long had they been planning this? What if he fights it? Michelle asked. He won't. Karen's voice was confident. He's too tired, too broken. He'll sign whatever we put in front of him just to end it. I stood frozen behind that tree, my heart pounding. This was it. This was the proof I needed. They weren't just cold or thoughtless, they were actively conspiring against me. They had lawyers, they had a plan to take my pension, they'd calculated exactly how to push me out while maintaining legal deniability. I pulled out my phone and started a voice recording app I'd downloaded that morning. Then I walked past the window again, slower this time. Split the house proceeds 3 ways, Karen was saying. After the sale, we each take our share and... They were planning to sell the house. The house I'd paid for. The house where I'd raised my children. I kept walking, kept recording, until I was out of earshot. Then I stopped the recording and saved it with the date and timestamp. This was my point of no return. I had evidence now, clear, recorded evidence of their conspiracy. They thought I was too broken to fight back. They thought I'd go quietly. They were wrong. That night, I sat in the shed and transcribed every word of that conversation. I wrote down every detail, every implication. Margaret Chen would want to see this. But I also knew something else. From this moment forward, this was war. They'd drawn the battle lines. They'd shown me exactly how ruthless they could be. Fine. I could be ruthless too. I pulled out the case from under the cot and opened it again. $200,000. My grandfather's gift. My secret weapon. Thank you, Grandpa, I whispered to the empty shed. You warned me. You were right. Family is who stands by you. And these people, my wife, my children, they'd never stood by me. They'd used me, drained me, and tossed me aside. But I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. I closed the case and slid it back into hiding. Tomorrow, I'd move the money somewhere safer. Tomorrow, I'd start executing the next phase of the plan. Tomorrow, they'd start to realize they'd made a terrible mistake. The next morning, I drove to a bank in the next town over. Not the branch where Karen and I had our joint accounts. I rented 3 safety deposit boxes under my name only and transferred the cash from my grandfather's case into them, keeping $50,000 in one box for emergencies. The bank manager didn't ask questions. She just processed the paperwork efficiently, gave me the keys, and wished me a good day. I felt lighter as I walked out. The money was secure now, hidden, protected. Next, I met with Margaret Chen again and played her the recording from the window. Her expression remained professional, but I saw anger flash in her eyes. "This is gold," she said. "This is conspiracy to commit fraud. They're planning to claim abandonment while actively forcing you out. They're planning to liquidate marital assets without your consent. This changes everything." What do? We file for divorce first. We beat them to it. And we file with a motion to protect all marital assets, freeze the accounts, prevent sale of the house, everything. They want to claim you abandoned them. We'll show the court exactly who abandoned whom. She started typing on her computer. "I'll have papers ready by end of day. We'll file tomorrow morning. Once that happens, they'll know you're serious. They'll know you're fighting back." "Good," I said. "Let them know." But when I drove home that afternoon, I noticed Derek's car in the driveway. And Michelle's. Both of them at the house in the middle of a workday? That wasn't normal. I parked on the street and approached the shed carefully. Something felt wrong. The shed door was ajar. I'd locked it that morning. I was certain of it. I pushed it open slowly. Inside, everything was overturned. The cot was flipped. The blankets were scattered. Someone had searched the place thoroughly. My heart raced. Had they found the case? No, I'd moved the money that morning, but they'd been looking for something. "Find what you were looking for?" I turned. Derek stood in the doorway, Michelle behind him. Both wore expressions I'd never seen before, cold, calculated. "We know you're planning something," Derek said. "Mom's lawyer called, said you'd been asking around about divorce attorneys. So they had spies, or maybe Margaret's inquiries had somehow gotten back to them. Small legal community in Cleveland. Word traveled. I'm protecting myself," I said calmly. "Protecting yourself?" Michelle laughed, but there was no humor in it. "From what? We gave you a place to stay. We're taking care of you." "You threw me out of my own house. You're still on the property," Derek said. "Still have shelter, electricity. You're being dramatic." I looked at him, really looked at him. When had my son become this person, this cold, manipulative stranger? "Get out of my shed," I said quietly. "Your shed?" Michelle stepped forward. "This is Mom's property. You don't own anything anymore, Dad. The sooner you accept that, the easier this will be." "I own half of everything," I said. "We're married. That's how it works." Derek smiled, and it was like looking at a shark. "Are you sure about that? Mum's been documenting your behavior, the erratic mood swings, the paranoia, the way you've isolated yourself out here. A good lawyer could make a case that you're not mentally competent to manage assets." My blood went cold. They were going to try to have me declared incompetent? To take control of everything? "You're insane," I said. "No," Michelle replied. "We're smart. And we're done playing games. Here's how this is going to work. You're going to sign over your interest in the house. You're going to agree to a clean split of the pension. Mom gets her share, you keep yours, everyone walks away. No lawyers, no court, no drama. And if I don't?" Derek pulled out his phone and showed me the screen. It was a photo of me, taken through the shed window last night. I was holding my grandfather's case, examining the contents. My stomach dropped. "We know you found something," Derek said. "We don't know what yet, but we know it's valuable, and if you don't cooperate, we'll tell the court you've been hiding assets. We'll say you're mentally unstable, hoarding money, paranoid. We'll paint a picture that will destroy you." "That money isn't marital property," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It was my grandfather's. It's inheritance." "Prove it," Michelle said. "Show us the documentation. The will, the legal transfer. Oh wait, you can't, can you? Because there is none. which means it's marital property, found on marital property, during a marriage. It all goes into the pot. They'd thought this through. They'd anticipated my moves. How long had they been planning this? You have 24 hours, Derek said. Sign the papers. Give up your share of the house and we'll let you keep whatever you found. Don't sign and we'll take everything. The house, the pension, the money, all of it. You're my children, I said, and I hated how my voice cracked. How can you do this? Michelle's expression didn't change. You're not our father anymore. You're just an obstacle. They left. I stood in the destroyed shed, shaking with anger and fear and something else, something darker. They'd threatened me, blackmailed me, tried to intimidate me into surrender, but they'd also made a mistake. They'd shown me exactly how far they were willing to go. And in doing so, they'd given me ammunition. I pulled out my phone and called Margaret Chen. They came after me, I said when she answered. I need to move up the timeline. How fast can we file? What happened? I told her everything. The search, the threats, the photo, the 24-hour ultimatum. She was quiet for a moment. Then, can you get to my office in an hour? Yes. Come now. We're filing today. And Mr. Harrison, we're not just filing for divorce. We're filing for a restraining order. They entered your residence without permission, threatened you, attempted to blackmail you. That's harassment at minimum, potentially coercion. Will it work? It'll freeze them in place. They won't be able to come near you, access your accounts, or do anything without court permission. It'll buy us time to build a real case. I looked around the destroyed shed, my temporary home, my prison. Do it, I said. Do all of it. One more thing, Margaret said. The money you found, we need to document it properly. Get photos, get proof of where it came from, establish the chain of possession. If they're going to claim it's marital property, we need to show otherwise. I have my grandfather's letter. It was in the case. Perfect. Bring it. Bring everything. An hour later, I was in her office. She photographed the letter, made copies, had me sign statements about when and how I'd found the case. She documented every detail of Derek and Michelle's visit, every threat they'd made. This is good, she said finally. Really good. They've overplayed their hand. The court will see this for what it is, a family attempting to financially abuse a vulnerable person. I'm not vulnerable, I said. She looked at me over her glasses. In the eyes of the law you are, and right now that works in our favor. Let them think you're weak. Let them think they're winning. Meanwhile, we'll build a case that will bury them. We filed the papers that afternoon. Divorce petition, motion to freeze assets, motion for restraining order, all of it. By evening, a process server would be delivering the documents to Karen. By morning, all hell would break loose. I drove back to the shed as the sun was setting. The house lights were on. I could see silhouettes moving behind the windows. My wife, my children, probably celebrating their intimidation tactics, thinking they'd won. They had no idea what was coming. I sat on the cot in the darkening shed and took a deep breath. The next few days would be brutal. They'd lash out, they'd escalate. But I was ready. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like I was in control. They'd made me into an enemy. Now they'd learn what that meant. The process server delivered the papers at 8 p.m. I watched from the shed window as Karen answered the door, signed for the envelope, and closed the door. 30 seconds of silence, then screaming. I couldn't make out the words, but the rage was unmistakable. Lights flicked on all over the house. I saw shadows moving frantically. Phone calls being made. I'd rattled them. Good. I gave myself 3 days of rest after that. Margaret had advised it. Let them panic. She'd said, let them make mistakes. So I stayed in the shed, kept my head down, and avoided all contact. Those 3 days were strange, peaceful in a way. I read books I'd been meaning to get to for years. I took long walks in the woods behind the property. I cooked simple meals on a camping stove I'd bought. I slept better than I had in weeks, despite the uncomfortable cot. Without the constant tension of dealing with my family, I could think clearly again. I could plan. I could strategize. On the fourth day, Karen came to the shed. I saw her approaching and braced myself. She was alone, dressed carefully. Not too casual, not too formal. Strategic appearance. She wanted something. She knocked on the shed door. "Robert, can we talk?" I opened the door but didn't invite her in. "We're not supposed to have contact. The restraining order." "That's temporary. The court will remove it once they understand this is all a misunderstanding." Her voice was soft, conciliatory. The voice she used to use when we first dated, when she wanted to persuade me of something. "Can I come in, please?" Against my better judgment, I stepped aside. She entered and looked around the shed, her nose wrinkling slightly at the smell of motor oil and the cramped conditions. "Robert, this is crazy," she said. "All of this, the lawyers, the court filings. We can work this out as a family." "We're not a family," I said. "A family doesn't throw someone out into a shed." "We didn't throw you out. We offered you space." She reached out to touch my arm, but I stepped back. "Honey, I know I've been difficult lately. The transition has been hard on all of us. But we love you. The kids love you. The kids threatened to have me declared incompetent. They were upset. They didn't mean it." She tried a smile. "You know how Derek gets when he's stressed. And Michelle, she's always been dramatic." I said nothing. Just watched her. Waited. "Look," Karen continued. "What if we started over? What if you moved back into the house, we went to counseling, we worked on our marriage? This doesn't have to end in divorce. What about my grandfather's money?" Her expression flickered, just for a second, but I saw it. Calculation. Greed. "What money?" she asked innocently. "Don't play games. You know what Derek and Michelle found." She sighed, abandoning the innocent act. "Okay, yes, they mentioned you found something. Robert, that's marital property. We should share it. That's what married couples do. It was buried before we even met. It was my grandfather's. Found on property we own together." Her voice hardened slightly. "A judge will see it my way. Maybe, maybe not. I guess we'll find out." She studied me for a long moment. "You've changed." "No," I said. "I finally stopped being blind." "What does that mean?" "It means I see you now. I see all of you, and I don't like what I see." Her mask slipped completely. The soft, conciliatory woman vanished, replaced by someone cold and angry. "You self-righteous bastard," she hissed. "You think you're the victim here? You think you're some kind of hero? You're pathetic. You spent your whole life being mediocre. Mediocre job, mediocre income, mediocre everything. The only thing you were good at was being stable, and now you can't even do that. Get out," I said quietly. "I gave you the best years of my life. I raised your children. I managed your household. And this is how you repay me? By suing me?" I said, "Get out." She moved towards the door, then stopped. "You'll lose, Robert. You'll lose everything. And when you do, don't come crying to me." She slammed the door on her way out. I stood there, breathing hard, waiting for the anger to subside. But underneath the anger was something else. Relief. She'd shown her true self. No more pretending. No more masks. Now I knew exactly what I was dealing with. That afternoon, I drove to my sister Janet's house, 3 hours away in Pennsylvania. I'd called ahead, told her I needed a break, needed perspective. She met me at the door with a hug. "You look terrible. Feel terrible too." Her husband Mark shook my hand, his expression sympathetic. "Jan told me what's been happening. I'm sorry, man. That's rough." They fed me dinner, Real food, not camping stove meals, and we talked. I told them everything, including about the money. Janet listened carefully, then said, "You're doing the right thing. Don't let them guilt you. Don't let them manipulate you." She tried today, came to the shed, tried to act like the loving wife. Of course she did. She wants that money. She'll say anything to get it. Janet leaned forward. "Rob, I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you years ago." I looked up. "What?" "Karen tried to borrow money from me. Twice. Once 5 years ago, once 3 years ago. Both times she said you guys were in debt, that you were spending too much, that she needed help covering bills." My stomach dropped. We weren't in debt. I managed the finances carefully. I know. That's why I didn't give her the money. I suspected she wanted it for something else. Janet's expression was grim. "I think she's been planning this for a long time, Rob. I think she's been preparing to leave you or push you out for years. She was setting up her own nest egg." The pieces clicked into place. The unexplained spending, the new car she'd bought for herself, the way she'd always resisted joint financial planning in recent years. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I tried to hint at it. But you didn't want to hear it. You loved her. I didn't want to be the sister who ruined your marriage." Janet reached across the table and took my hand. "But I should have been clearer. I should have warned you directly. I'm sorry." "Don't be," I said. "I probably wouldn't have believed you anyway." Mark spoke up. "For what it's worth, you've got support here. Whatever you need, a place to stay, financial help, character witness in court, we're here." I felt something break loose in my chest. Gratitude. Relief. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't alone. "Thank you," I managed to say. I stayed with them for 2 days. We talked strategy. Janet helped me organize my documentation. Mark, who worked in accounting, helped me create a financial timeline showing all of Karen's suspicious transactions over the past few years. By the time I drove back to Ohio, I felt fortified, centered, ready. Karen had tried to tempt me with reconciliation, tried to manipulate me with guilt. When that failed, she'd shown her venom. But I'd resisted. I'd stayed calm. And I'd found allies who actually cared about me. The war wasn't over, but I was no longer fighting it alone. I got back to the shed late on Sunday evening. The house was dark, which was odd. Usually someone was home. I parked, walked across the yard, and noticed immediately that something was off. The padlock on the shed door had been cut. Not broken, not forced. Cut cleanly with bolt cutters. Someone had deliberately accessed my space. I pushed the door open carefully. Nothing looked disturbed this time. They'd learned subtlety. But I knew they'd been here. I could sense it. A faint perfume smell. Michelle's perfume. I checked under the cot. The hiding spot was empty, but that was fine. The money was in the bank safety deposit boxes. They wouldn't find anything. I was setting up the camping stove for dinner when I heard footsteps. Multiple people approaching. I stepped outside. Karen, Derek, and Michelle were walking toward the shed together. United front. This was planned. "We need to talk," Karen announced. "All of us, as a family. The restraining order was modified by the judge this afternoon." Derek interrupted. "We can have supervised contact for the purposes of mediation. That's what this is. Mediation. Supervised by whom? By us." Michelle said. "We're all adults. We can talk like adults." I doubted that, but I was curious what they wanted. "Fine. Talk." Karen stepped forward, and her expression was softer than it had been during her last visit. But I didn't trust it. Not anymore. "Robert, we've been thinking. Really thinking. And we realize we've handled this poorly. We hurt you, and that wasn't our intention. We want to make this right. How? Come back into the house," she said. "Move out of this shed. We'll go to family counseling. We'll work on our communication. We'll rebuild our relationships. It sounded good. Reasonable. Exactly what I might have wanted to hear 3 weeks ago. But I'd learned to look past the words to the motivation behind them. What about the divorce filing? I asked. We'll ask you to withdraw it, Derek said. Drop the legal action. Drop the restraining order. We all step back from the lawyers and work this out ourselves. And my grandfather's money? Silence. They exchanged glances. Finally, Michelle spoke. We split it, fairly. The house money, the savings, the inheritance, everything goes into one pot and gets divided according to what's fair. Fair according to whom? According to the contribution each of us made. Derek said. Mom raised us, managed the household. That's worth something. We're her children. We deserve something from our grandfather, too. He wasn't your grandfather. He was mine. Family inheritance benefits everyone, Karen said. That's how it works, Robert. You're being selfish. There it was, the real accusation. I was being selfish by wanting to keep what was mine. Karen's soft expression vanished instantly. We're trying to be reasonable here. We're offering you a chance to end this without destroying our family. Our family was destroyed when you put me in a shed. You're being dramatic, Derek said. The shed was temporary. We told you that. Temporary until what? Until I died? Until I signed over everything I owned? Until you learned some gratitude. Karen's voice rose. You think I wanted to spend 28 years married to someone who was never going to be more than adequate? You think I enjoyed being married to mediocrity? There it was. The truth beneath all the layers. She'd always thought I wasn't good enough. Then why did you marry me? I asked quietly. Because I thought you'd improve. I thought you'd grow, advance, make something of yourself. But you stayed stuck at the same job, the same level, year after year. Do you know how embarrassing that was? Watching my friends' husbands become executives while mine stayed a mid-level engineer? Michelle joined in. And you wonder why we don't respect you? Dad, you were always just there, never achieving anything great, never standing out, just existing. I provided for this family, I said. I gave you everything. You gave us adequacy, Derek said. That's not the same as giving us everything. I looked at the three of them, my wife, my son, my daughter. They weren't even trying to hide their contempt anymore. The masks were completely off. This isn't mediation, I said. This is an ambush. You came here to guilt me, shame me, manipulate me into giving up. We came here to give you one last chance. Karen said coldly. Take it or leave it. Come back to the house, drop the legal action, share the inheritance, and we'll let you back into the family. Or don't, and spend the rest of your life alone fighting a legal battle you can't win. Why can't I win? Because we're going to tell the court you're mentally unstable, Michelle said flatly. We're going to tell them you've become paranoid, delusional. We're going to say you locked yourself in this shed, that you're refusing treatment, that you're a danger to yourself. We're going to tell them about the hoarding, Derek added. The way you've been hiding things, becoming obsessive. We're going to paint a picture of someone who's had a mental breakdown. No court will believe that, I said, but my voice wavered. Won't they? Karen smiled, and it was cruel. A man who's just retired, who's isolated himself, who's become paranoid about his own family, who's filing frivolous lawsuits and making wild accusations. It's a textbook case of post-retirement depression and anxiety. Any psychiatrist will see it. They'd thought of everything, every angle, every way to attack me. You're my family, I said, and I hated how weak my voice sounded. How can you do this to me? You stopped being family when you stopped being useful, Karen said. Now you're just in the way. The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. Not even angry cruelty, just matter-of-fact dismissal. I'd been categorized, evaluated, and found wanting. I drew myself up. "Get off my property." "Your property?" Derek laughed. "This is Mom's property. You're living here on her charity." "Get off my property." For a moment, I thought Derek might actually take a swing at me. His fists clenched, his jaw tightened. Michelle put a hand on his arm, restraining him. "You're making a huge mistake," Karen said. "You think you can fight us? You think you can win? We're going to take everything, Robert. The house, the money, your pension, your dignity, all of it. And when we're done, you'll have nothing." "We'll see," I said. They turned and walked back towards the house. Halfway there, Karen called back. "You have until Friday to change your mind. After that, we file our countersuit. And Robert, it's going to get very ugly." I watched them disappear into the house. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding. Fear threaded through my chest like ice water. But underneath the fear was something else. Something harder. Something cold. They'd tried to break me. Tried to terrify me into submission. They'd shown me their worst selves, thinking it would make me fold. They were wrong. I pulled out my phone and called Margaret Chen. She answered on the second ring. "They came after me again," I said. "I have it all recorded." I'd started keeping my phone's recording app running whenever they were around. They threatened me, admitted to planning a countersuit claiming I'm mentally unstable, admitted they're going to try to take everything. "Send me the recording immediately," Margaret said. "This is harassment. This is conspiracy. This is exactly what we need." They said I have until Friday. Forget Friday. We move tomorrow. I'll file an emergency motion based on this new evidence. They've just handed us everything we need to bury them. After I hung up, I sat on the cot and let myself feel the fear. Really feel it. Let it wash through me, then I let it go. They wanted war. They were going to get it. The emergency hearing was set for Tuesday morning. Margaret filed motions late Monday night, and by Tuesday at 9 a.m., we were all in a courtroom in downtown Cleveland. Judge Patricia Morrison presided, a woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and an expression that suggested she'd seen every trick in the book. Margaret had said she was fair, but had zero tolerance for games. Karen sat at the plaintiff's table with her lawyer, a slick-looking man named Bradley Hoffman, who'd probably cost her a fortune. Derek and Michelle sat in the gallery behind her, both dressed professionally, both wearing masks of concern and sadness. I sat with Margaret, wearing my best suit, freshly shaved, looking as stable and competent as possible. Judge Morrison looked over the filings, then fixed her gaze on both tables. "This is a mess. Both sides are accusing the other of harassment, abuse, and financial manipulation. I don't like messes, so we're going to sort this out right now. Mr. Hoffman, your client filed the countersuit. You go first." Hoffman stood smoothly. "Your Honor, my client has been married to the respondent for 28 years. She's raised his children, managed his household, and supported his career. Recently, Mr. Harrison took early retirement and subsequently became withdrawn, paranoid, and erratic. He's made wild accusations against his family, filed frivolous legal claims, and has been living in a shed on the property despite having a perfectly good home available to him." "Why is he living in a shed?" the judge asked. "By his own choice, Your Honor. Mrs. Harrison offered him space in the home, but he refused." "That's not true," I said quietly. "Mr. Harrison, you'll have your turn," Judge Morrison said. "Continue, Mr. Hoffman." "My client is concerned about her husband's mental state. She believes he's experiencing a form of late-onset paranoia, possibly post-retirement depression. She's tried to get him help, tried to reconcile, but he's refused all attempts at communication." "What about this money he allegedly found?" the judge asked. "The inheritance." Hoffman shifted slightly, the first crack in his smooth presentation. "Your Honor, any assets found on marital property during a marriage are, by definition, marital property. Mr. Harrison has been hiding these assets and refusing to disclose their full value." "Ms. Chen." The judge looked at Margaret. Your turn. Margaret stood, and there was something steely in her posture. Your Honor, my client is not paranoid or mentally unstable. He's the victim of a calculated campaign of financial and emotional abuse by his wife and children. We have documentation, recordings, and witnesses that show a clear pattern of manipulation designed to force him out of his home and deprive him of his assets. She laid out the timeline methodically. The sudden change after retirement, the demand that he move to the shed, the threats to have him declared incompetent, the searching of his belongings, the overheard conversation about selling the house without his knowledge. Then she played the recordings. The courtroom was silent as Karen's voice filled the space. We're going to tell the court you're mentally unstable. We're going to tell them you've become paranoid, delusional. Michelle's voice. You stopped being family when you stopped being useful. Derek's voice. We're going to take everything, Robert. The house, the money, your pension, your dignity. I watched Karen's face as the recordings played. She went pale, then red. Hoffman was whispering urgently to her, but she wasn't listening. When the recording ended, Judge Morrison was silent for a long moment. Then she looked at Karen. Mrs. Harrison, did you make those statements? Karen stood slowly. Your Honor, those statements were taken out of context. We were upset. We said things we didn't mean. Did you tell your husband he was no longer family? That he had stopped being useful? I was angry. He was being unreasonable. Yes or no, Mrs. Harrison? Karen's mask cracked completely. Yes, I said those things. But he deserved it. He's been impossible to live with. He's been hiding money. He's been... Stop talking! Hoffman hissed, but it was too late. Judge Morrison turned to Derek and Michelle. And you two participated in this, threatened your father, searched his belongings without permission. Derek stood up. Your Honor, with respect, he's our father. We have a right to be concerned about his welfare. You have a right to be concerned. You don't have a right to threaten him with false psychiatric claims. You don't have a right to enter his residence without permission. She looked back at the recording's transcript. You don't have a right to conspire to take his assets. It's not conspiracy, Michelle said, standing as well. We're his family. We deserve... You deserve what the law says you deserve. Judge Morrison cut her off. Not what you decide you deserve through intimidation and manipulation. She turned to Hoffman. Counselor, your clients have just admitted on the record to making threats against Mr. Harrison. They've admitted to coercion. They've admitted to entering his residence without permission. Do you really want to continue with this countersuit? Hoffman looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. Your Honor, perhaps we should take a recess and discuss... No recess. I've heard enough. Judge Morrison looked at her notes. Here's what's going to happen. The restraining order against Mrs. Harrison and her children is hereby made permanent. They are not to contact Mr. Harrison except through legal counsel. They are not to enter his residence. Yes, Mr. Hoffman, the shed counts as his residence. They are not to access any of his financial accounts. Your Honor, Hoffman protested, they're still married. She has rights to marital property. She has forfeited those rights through her behavior. All marital assets are frozen pending full divorce proceedings. The house will not be sold. No accounts will be accessed without court permission. She looked at Karen. Mrs. Harrison, you and your children have engaged in what appears to be textbook elder abuse and financial exploitation. He's 52, Karen said desperately. He's not elderly. The statute applies to vulnerable adults of any age. Your own statements show you viewed him as vulnerable and exploited that vulnerability. Judge Morrison's voice was ice. I'm referring this case to the District Attorney's Office for potential criminal charges. The courtroom erupted. Kieran was shouting. Michelle was crying. Derek was arguing with Hoffman. The bailiff had to call for order twice. I sat quietly, letting it wash over me. Margaret had her hand on my arm, steadying me, but I didn't need steadying. I felt calm, Clear. Judge Morrison banged her gavel. Enough, we're done here. Ms. Chen, prepare a full accounting of all assets for the divorce proceedings. Mr. Hoffman, I suggest you advise your clients to cooperate fully. And Mrs. Harrison, I suggest you get yourself a criminal defense attorney, because I suspect you're going to need one. She stood and left the bench. The courtroom slowly cleared. Karen wouldn't look at me as she left with Hoffman. Derek and Michelle shot me looks of pure hatred as they followed. I didn't care. They'd lost. Completely, utterly. Margaret packed up her briefcase. That went better than I expected. What happens now? Now we proceed with the divorce. Given what just happened, I expect a settlement offer within a week. They'll want to avoid criminal charges, avoid further court exposure. You'll get everything you're entitled to, Robert. Maybe more. And the money? My grandfather's inheritance? That's yours. Clearly. The judge made that obvious. She looked at me. How do you feel? I thought about it. Free, I finally said. For the first time in years, I feel free. We walked out of the courthouse into the bright October sunlight. Somewhere behind me, my former family was regrouping, planning their next move. But they'd already lost. They just didn't know it yet. The settlement offer came 6 days later, exactly as Margaret had predicted. Hoffman delivered it personally to her office, looking haggard and defeated. Margaret called me in to review it. They're offering you the house, she said, sliding the document across her desk. Full ownership, no split. They're waiving any claim to your pension. They're agreeing to divide other marital assets 60-40 in your favor. And they're formally acknowledging that your grandfather's inheritance is yours alone. I read through the document carefully. What about Karen? Where does she go? She'll find somewhere else to live. That's not your concern anymore. Margaret leaned back. Robert, this is an excellent settlement. It's more than we could reasonably expect. They're desperate to avoid criminal prosecution. Is the DA pursuing charges? They're investigating. Karen's scared. So are Derek and Michelle. Financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult is a felony in Ohio. If convicted, they could face prison time. Prison. My wife and children behind bars. A year ago, the thought would have horrified me. Now I felt nothing but a cold satisfaction. What do you recommend? I asked. Take the settlement. This gives you everything. The house, your assets, your freedom. You can rebuild your life without them dragging you through years of litigation. And they get away with what they did? Not entirely. The court records are public. Anyone who searches their names will find this case. Employers, friends, future romantic partners. It'll follow them. That's a kind of justice. I thought about it. Part of me wanted to push further, wanted to see them suffer more, but Margaret was right. This gave me everything I needed to move forward. I'll take it, I said, but I want one addition. What's that? I want a public apology, from all three of them, in writing, admitting what they did, admitting they were wrong. I want it notarized and made part of the public record. Margaret smiled. They'll hate that. Good. She called Hoffman. I listened to her end of the conversation, watching her face. Hoffman resisted at first, but Margaret was relentless. Finally, she hung up. They'll do it, she said. They have no choice. Sign or face criminal prosecution. 3 days later, I received 3 separate letters, each notarized, each part of the official court record. Karen's was brief, almost clinical. I acknowledged that I treated Robert Harrison with cruelty and disrespect. I manipulated him financially and emotionally. I conspired with my children to deprive him of his assets and dignity. I was wrong. I am sorry. Derek's was similar, slightly longer but equally hollow. Words on paper forced by legal pressure rather than genuine remorse. Michelle's was the shortest. I participated in the abuse of my father. I am ashamed of my actions. I apologize. I read them once, then filed them away. They meant nothing emotionally, but legally they were powerful. Permanent admissions of guilt. The divorce was finalized 30 days later. I stood in Judge Morrison's courtroom one last time as she made it official. Mr. Harrison, You are hereby granted a divorce from Karen Marie Harrison. All assets as outlined in the settlement agreement are awarded accordingly. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor. Mrs. Harrison, do you understand? Corin, standing across the courtroom with Hoffman, nodded. She looked smaller than I remembered. Defeated. She didn't look at me once during the entire proceeding. Then this matter is concluded. Judge Morrison brought down her gavel. You're both free to go. Free. That word again. I walked out of the courthouse and drove directly to the house. My house now, legally and fully. Karen had moved out the previous week, taking only her personal belongings as specified in the settlement. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. It was strange, walking through rooms that had been off limits for months. The living room where I'd spent countless evenings. The kitchen where I'd cooked family dinners. The bedroom where Karen and I had slept for 28 years. It all felt foreign now, tainted by memories of betrayal. I spent the next week purging the house. Everything that was Karen's, everything that reminded me of Derek and Michelle, I donated it all. Furniture, decorations, clothes left behind. I wanted nothing that connected me to them. I repainted the walls. I rearranged the rooms. I turned Derek's old bedroom into a library. Michelle's room became a workshop. I took my grandfather's case out of the safety deposit box and brought it home. I placed his letter in a frame and hung it in my new library. Family is who stands by you. Thomas came over one Saturday to help me set up new furniture. We worked in comfortable silence for a while, then took a break on the back deck. How are you doing? He asked. Really? I looked out at the yard. The shed was still there. I'd decided to keep it. Not as a residence, but as a reminder. A monument to what I'd survived. I'm good, I said. Better than I've been in years. Any regrets? Did I regret the marriage? The children? The years I'd spent providing for a family that ultimately betrayed me? No, I said finally. I don't regret loving them. I regret that they never really loved me back. But that's their loss, not mine. Thomas nodded. What's next for you? Live, I said simply. Actually live. Maybe travel, maybe volunteer, maybe find someone who actually values me. You deserve that. I thought about my grandfather, about the gift he'd left me. Not just the money, but the lesson, the warning. I'd learned it the hard way, but I'd learned it. My sister Janet called that evening. I heard the divorce is final. How are you celebrating? Haven't thought about it. Well, think about it. This is a victory, Rob. You fought back and you won. That deserves recognition. She was right. I'd fought the hardest battle of my life and emerged on the other side intact. Scarred, yes, changed, absolutely. But intact. Come visit, I said. Bring Mark. I'll cook dinner. We'll celebrate properly. Our deal. After I hung up, I walked through my house one more time. My house, my space, my life. No more walking on eggshells. No more being dismissed or devalued. No more pretending that contempt was love. I was 52 years old. I had my inheritance. I had my pension. I had my freedom. And I had finally learned the most important lesson. Never let anyone make you feel worthless, especially not the people who claim to love you. Karen and the kids had tried to destroy me. Instead, they'd forced me to save myself. In the end, that was the greatest gift they could have given me. 6 months after the divorce, I was unrecognizable. Not physically. Though I'd lost the stress weight, started exercising again, had more energy than I'd had in years. But internally, the man who'd walked into that shed defeated and broken was gone. In his place was someone harder, wiser, more alive. I used part of my grandfather's money to completely renovate the house. New kitchen, updated bathrooms, hardwood floors throughout. The place gleamed. It felt like mine now, truly mine, free of ghosts and bad memories. I started volunteering at a local community center, teaching basic engineering and home repair skills to kids who couldn't afford formal classes. It was rewarding in ways my corporate job had never been. These kids appreciated what I taught them. They looked up to me. I took that trip to Colorado I'd always wanted. Then I took another trip to Montana, then to Arizona. I traveled light, stayed in small towns, met interesting people. For the first time in my adult life, I was living for myself. I even started dating again. Nothing serious yet, but it was nice to spend time with people who actually enjoyed my company, who laughed at my jokes, who saw value in who I was rather than what I could provide. Thomas and I started a weekly poker game with some other retired guys from the plant. We'd sit around my new dining room table, trading stories, playing cards, enjoying each other's company. Real friendship. Real connection. My sister Janet visited often. She and Mark would drive up for weekends, and we'd cook together, watch movies, just be family. The kind of family my grandfather had written about, people who stood by each other. Life was good, really genuinely good. Meanwhile, Karen's life had gone in the opposite direction. I heard updates through the small-town gossip network, through mutual acquaintances we still had. I didn't seek out the information, but it found me anyway. Karen had moved into a small apartment across town, the kind of place she would have turned her nose up at a year ago. Her friends from the book club had distanced themselves after the court case became public. Apparently being known as someone who abused their husband wasn't good for one's social standing. She'd tried to get a job, her first job in almost 30 years, but finding work in your mid-50s with no recent experience was nearly impossible. Last I heard, she was working part-time at a department store, barely making ends meet. The irony wasn't lost on me. She'd thrown me out for being mediocre, for not earning enough. Now she was struggling financially while I lived comfortably on my pension and inheritance. He'd moved back in with Karen in that small apartment. A 30-year-old man living with his mother. Both of them bitter and broke. Michelle had fared slightly better. She still had her real estate license, but the scandal had damaged her reputation. Clients didn't want to work with someone who'd been publicly documented as abusing their father. Her sales had dropped significantly. She'd married quickly, probably trying to find financial stability. But I'd heard through the grapevine that her new husband was already having doubts. Apparently she'd shown the same manipulative tendencies with him that she'd shown with me. The DA had ultimately decided not to pursue criminal charges, partly because of the settlement, partly because I hadn't pushed for it, but the investigation had been public enough to damage all three of them permanently. Sometimes I felt a twinge of something when I heard these updates. Not quite pity, not quite satisfaction. Something in between. They'd made their choices. They'd shown their true characters. Now they were living with the consequences. I, on the other hand, was thriving. One Saturday afternoon, I was working in my garden, another new hobby, when my neighbor, Mrs. Chen, no relation to my lawyer, called over the fence. "Robert, your yard looks wonderful. You've really transformed this place." "Thank you, Mrs. Chen. It's been a labor of love." "You seem happy. Truly happy. It's nice to see after everything you went through." "I am happy," I said, and realized it was completely true. "Good for you. You deserved better than what they gave you." After she went inside, I sat on my back deck and looked at the shed. I still hadn't torn it down. It served as a reminder, not of my lowest point, but of my turning point. The moment I'd found my grandfather's gift. The moment I'd decided to fight back. I'd lost a wife and children who'd never really loved me, but I'd gained something more valuable. Self-respect. Freedom. A life lived on my own terms. My grandfather had written that family is who stands by you. He'd been right. My real family now was Thomas, Janet, Mark, the guys from poker night, the kids I taught at the community center, people who saw me, valued me, stood by me. Karen, Derek, and Michelle had tried to break me. Instead, they'd freed me. And as I sat there in the evening sun, looking at my beautiful home, my well-tended garden, my whole new life spread out before me, I realized something. They'd done me a favor. So that's my story. From the shed to complete freedom. From being thrown away to reclaiming my life. I want to ask you something. What would you have done? Would you have fought back, or would you have walked away? Would you have forgiven them, or would you have demanded justice? Family is supposed to stand by you. But what happens when they don't? When they show you who they really are? I learned that blood doesn't make family. Loyalty does, respect does, love does. If my story resonated with you, leave a comment below. Share your own experiences. Let's support each other. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories of people who fought back, who rebuilt, who refused to be broken, subscribe to my channel. I've got more to tell. Thanks for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to live through, but it was worth it. Remember, you're never too old to start over, you're never too broken to rebuild, and you're never alone if you're willing to reach out. Take care of yourselves, and remember, family is who stands by you.